Hey, everybody, it's Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News. And I'm very pleased to have with us today Tae Oh, who's the founder of Spacecoin. Tae, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Doug. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Tae, founder of Spacecoin. We are trying to create a decentralized network of satellites, and our ultimate goal is to connect the 2.6 billion unconnected and ultimately create a permissionless network.
So this is huge because, it's sometimes off the radar of a lot of our readers that when you say 2 billion people, I
Mm,
think that's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 people in the whole world. And you're
yeah.
saying a lot of people just don't have access to basic connectivity.
Yeah, because our current internet infrastructure is based on a fiber optics cable, and laying down fiber optics is very expensive. I forgot the exact number, but they estimate it would cost people about like 60 billion US dollars to expand the current infrastructure to provide uh, at minimum coverage around the whole globe. And that's not counting overseas. So it's like for countries like Indonesia, where they have like 4,000, 6,000 islands, then it'll be almost close to impossible for them to create connectivity for all their people.
So here comes Spacecoin, and what you propose to do is you don't even have to worry about laying that cable.
Right, right. So Starlink paved the way for us. Like there are a couple of other satellite-based internet service providers that are out there, but Starlink, they paved the way, demonstrated that now it's actually feasible, technologically feasible to deploy satellites and create a network to create a connectivity from the sky, providing global coverage. And the difference between Starlink and us, there's two different ways to look at it. The first one is while Starlink is optimizing for high bandwidth, more expensive connectivity. So, for example, like 4K Netflix streaming connectivity, we are optimizing for serving more number of people, smaller data rate, but cheaper connectivity. And another way to look at it is Starlink is kind of like iOS, Apple ecosystem, all centralized, built and designed and controlled by one company. We are trying to create an open source and open network where anyone can deploy their own satellite using our open source, and have they can join the network freely and leave the network freely, and ultimately having a permissionless decentralized network serving everyone on the globe.
And this idea of open source is huge. In other words, that there's nothing wrong with the different approach, of course,
Of course,
but
of
open
course.
source democratizes connectivity. It democratizes access. It lowers the barrier.
Right, right. So when people ask me about why do you have to do it open source, why do you have to decentralize, why do you have to do it a permissionless list? My answer to them is it's not that we believe everything should be open source or everything should be decentralized. My point is we want to give people an option. So, for example, me coming from the crypto background, blockchain background, I tell people while US dollar works and wire transfers works already. People wanted a permissionless option, so they created Bitcoin. While AWS and other cloud computing solutions work, people wanted a permissionless option, and that's why they created Ethereum and so on and so forth. All the centralized version of telco inter-service providers work well, but we wanted to create a permissionless option and open source option, which is why we're working on currently Spacecoin.
So, Tay, we have today a video that's, I think, going to show us a little bit more about what this is all about. So let's put that up on the stage. Oh, really good. So that was really, what did we see there? We saw one, two, I think three satellites. You were telling me before we began that you're at the first satellite stage. You're going to need a second. Tell me a
Mhm.
little bit more about that process.
So we deployed our first satellite last year, December, with SpaceX. That's the purpose of that satellite is to demonstrate the capability to create a link between space and on the ground. We're deploying three more satellites later this year, scheduled to get deployed in October with SpaceX again. And that is to demonstrate handover. So, like when you're on a highway, your cell phone gets connected from one cell tower to next cell tower and getting handed over gracefully. We are demonstrating that with the satellites and also inter-satellite link, creating a link between satellites. And ultimately, by combining those two, we are allowing satellites to talk to each other, compare notes as the signal coming from the ground and normalize it so that it can create a better signal between the space and on the ground. That will be our potentially last test satellite deployment.
Now, there's a commercial side to this. There's the coin is actually in your name. So
Correct.
why did so there's two things, at least in my mind, that maybe they're one. In other words, you're providing via satellite connectivity, but
Mhm.
you're also providing what it looks like to be a payment platform.
Right, right. So the reason why we have coin in this network is that because we wanted to design the network in a decentralized manner, meaning all the satellites are not owned by one entity, but we are assuming they are owned by different people, different entities. So not necessarily having to trust each other. And in order to pay each other when you don't trust each other, and cryptocurrency is the solution, and that's where the space coin comes in, being able to work with each other and pay each other for a data transmission without having to know or trust each other. And yeah, that's where Spacecoin comes in.
And you're literally, your target market is literally the equator.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that
So
yeah.
we are targeting Equator because Equator happens to be where all the most populated countries and emerging market are located. Nigeria from Africa, India from South Asia, Indonesia from Southeast Asia are all around the equator, and they get to share the same satellite constellation, which is going around the equator, so that it lowers the cost of deploying the satellites to serve hundreds of millions of people who are unconnected in those three regions.
And this gives you an initial market of, including everybody, of about
Mm.
3 billion people. Is that right?
Right, right. So the unconnected population around the globe is roughly 3 billion people.
Hmm.
And across these three countries, Nigeria, India, Indonesia, there are roughly 800 million unconnected people.
Unconnected people. So this is
Right,
very significant too, because we've, India has this different image over the last decade of now becoming an advanced nation, but it's still really a developing country. And you're
right.
informing us, I think they have 1.3, 1.4 billion people,
Mm.
but yet 800 million are actually unconnected.
Right, 800 million unconnected because, um, for example, they have a huge landmass. So,
Hmm.
and to deploy the fiber optic cable, it's not just deploying the cable, but also having to secure it and having the electricity and power to make it work. And that's a huge amount of investment they have to make to justify to lay all the cables. Even in the United States or in Canada, if you go on a highway, you start losing connectivity because
Right.
it's not economically feasible to provide optic fiber and cell towers everywhere. So, and the situation is just worse in those regions. And in case of Indonesia, they have so many thousands of islands. So now it becomes even more harder to provide connectivity across the whole nation. And that is why there are so many unconnected people.
Hey, you've also revealed something I think very important that everyone should think about, which is the media, I'm part of that too,
Mhm.
mostly are located in the largest cities. So it's not even on their radar. They're not looking at rural poverty, rural farmers, lots of
Mm,
millions and millions of people, even in the
mm,
developed world, that are often just down the road, but may lack connectivity, may also lack resources, whole communities that are underdeveloped because there's no connectivity. So
right.
beyond the individual, also there's also barriers to getting these areas revitalized.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this saying, like if a tree falls down in the forest and there's nobody else around, does it
Right,
make a sound? Like similarly, if you're not online, then you're not part of the digital economy, which is the major economy these days, and you're basically not counted. Your voice is not heard,
right.
your value is not connected to the market. So by bringing these people online, I think we can contribute a huge growth in GDP or the world economy, and even for themselves, they will be able to harness their talent and provide value and in exchange earn good earnings for their lives and uplift them from poverty.
I'm also struck that this sort of merging of, it's a developing part of the world, but you're coming in with a very advanced tool that combines information and commerce all in one thing. You don't
Yes.
have to go out and buy a separate way to take money or give money.
Right, right. So because the payment these days is essentially exchange of information. Okay, I have X amount of balance in my digital account, and I want to transfer my balance, like Y amount of balance to that account. That's all data. And given internet connection, people can make that kind of transaction without having to walk like 5, 10 kilometers to the POS station and make payment and then walk back again. So it saves a lot of effort and time for everyone, which is better.
So, let's get into the business model part of this. You've talked a little bit about what you're trying to do with the actual end customer. How
Mhm.
does your approach differ from, let's say, a traditional telecom satellite provider, or even also regular phone companies,
Right, right. So
carriers like Comcast and so on?
we don't necessarily try to be a telco ourselves. We work with third parties like telcos, military, governments, who have their own spectrum license, clients, and also the distribution channel. We want to be satellite backhaul that they to allow them to reach the area that they currently cannot. And currently, we are talking to those three types of customers in the countries that we have mentioned and many more.
Now, do you think that this business model can be scaled in these emerging markets?
Well, absolutely, because there are so many unconnected people, and this is how I calculate. So let me give you a rough calculation. Let's say we spend 100 million to deploy a constellation. And let's say they survive 5 years because LEO satellites lifetime is 3 to 7 years. Let's say 5 years. So every year we're spending 20 million, and let's say we're charging $2 per month. So 20 million divided by two is 10 million, and now divided by 12 because 12 months per year, and that's roughly slightly less than a million. And there are 800 million people in just those three countries: Nigeria, India, Indonesia, and 3 billion people are all around the globe. So this is very achievable goal to actually have a very profitable business.
I'm really intrigued by this idea that you are a for-profit company. You are a private sector firm,
Mhm.
attracting individual investors and so on. You aim to actually make a profit, and yet you'll be able to provide a very needed activity or very needed resource asset to millions of people. And still, there's a business model here.
I mean, that's what business is about. Like create value for other people and take a small cut out of it so that both parties are happy.
So, Tae, this has really been most interesting. It's a lot of fun to basically podcast a company sort of right at you're actually launching stuff into space. So you're still sort of just a little bit beyond the launch stage. You've got some milestones coming up. What's next for Spacecoin?
So we are, as aforementioned, we are launching 3 more satellites around end of this year, and that will demonstrate a couple more capabilities that I mentioned, which is intersatellite link and so on and so forth. And with that demonstration, we will complete our proof of concept, a proof of technology, and decide how many satellites we want to launch around where, and also we will accept orders from our clients because we are not launching our own constellation. This is a decentralized network, and finally launching our first service constellation, and that will be coming in 1 to 2 years.
So, we're not at the point of you taking orders yet, and so on. But I bet you'd like to talk to people. Can companies that are sort of interested in what's happening talk to you?
Yeah, I mean, we are open to talk to anyone in the telco side, government side, anyone who's interested. And as soon as they get comfortable enough to with purchase orders, we can start accepting them.
Well, Tay, this has again been really interesting. I hope we get to do more podcasts as your company progresses and enters into these new stages. Where can we learn more about Spacecoin?
You can find more information about Spacecoin at our website, spacecoin.org, and we will eventually post our technology development and all kinds of good stuff. Link to this podcast probably.
All right. Well, keep us up to date. Let's visit again every few months to find out what's happening. But for now, thank
Right.
you very much indeed.
Thank you. See you again.